Now is New York Congresswoman and member of the House Ways and Means Committee, Nicole Maliotakis. Congresswoman, it's good to see you. Thanks very much for being here. Tell me about the first hearing and how will you tackle this issue where 40-year high inflation has been cutting into everybody's ability in terms of saving and spending?
Yeah, look, if you look at President Biden's Twitter page, he paints a very different reality, one that is of disillusion, one that is of just rhetoric and gaslighting. The reality is that the American people are struggling, they are suffering, small businesses are suffering, and that is the goal of this hearing today, is to go out there into the country, hear from actual people who are trying to make ends meet both for their personal lives and their business lives. The facility we're going to see is actually a lumber facility, and they're telling us that it costs them more to ship around the United States because of our high fuel costs than it does to send a container of lumber to China. Things like that are really problematic for the future of this country. And so our goal in the Ways and Means Committee is to use tax and trade policy to restore energy independence, to make sure that we address the supply chain issues that we have, but also to enhance trade. That's the one way where we can improve our GDP, is looking at these trade deals that Biden has not done anything. He has not done anything to try to improve our relationships with our neighbors in Central and South America or with the Indo-Pacific or other regions. And so we're very focused on going forward and also looking at medical innovation, medical security. How do we bring that supply chain home from China? The pharmaceutical ingredients that we rely on, we can't allow them to ever weaponize that against us, as you see Russia right now weaponizing energy against Europe.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's a Wall Street Journal story this morning about the Securities and Exchange Commission considering easing the climate disclosure rules. This is a subject that we've talked about so much, that President Biden's climate change agenda takes priority over everything. So whether it be all of that borrowing, this reckless spending, getting us into this situation of debt, the 40-year high inflation, it all comes under this idea of climate disclosure rules, and the climate change agenda is setting the tone. So we see that the Journal is reporting that the SEC is now considering softening some of these planned rules, which require companies to disclose the extreme effects of climate change and other costs of global warming, and disclose all of that. Your thoughts on what that would mean if we were to see this softening?
Well, look, we're seeing how companies are not investing in expanding their facilities because they think there is an anti-energy sentiment out there, which there is. Everything from, putting pressure on banks not to lend to energy companies, to not expanding our infrastructure in this Keystone Pipeline, for example, to some of the regulations that have been put in place that have really destroyed traditional energy sources. Look, I think most of us want, we all support clean energy diversification, but it can't be to the exclusion of traditional energy sources that we rely on. Look what is happening in Europe right now, where it's being weaponized against them by Russia. And now you're seeing these countries starting to backtrack, right? They're starting to backtrack on some of these nuclear plant closures. They're starting to backtrack on hydraulic fracturing. And that is exactly what we're seeing potentially happening here in the United States if we don't reverse some of these dangerous policies. We cannot beg our adversaries for oil. The president talks a lot about made in America, right? If you read his Twitter page, made in America. But when it comes to our energy, he wants to rely on adversaries, whether it be Iran, whether it be, Venezuela for oil, or whether it be, solar panels from China or what have you. So we need to be energy independent. That is important for our future.
Well, we'll see if this comes up tomorrow night for the State of the Union. And, Congressman, what is he going to say about the border? I mean, New York City Mayor Eric Adams spent the night at the migrant facility in Brooklyn, hoping to convince more migrants to stay there because they all refused to leave the Watson Hotel in Manhattan last week. I mean, they just camped out outside the hotel. The New York Post is reporting that migrants are fed up, okay? They're abandoning New York City. And they're taking taxpayer-funded buses to Canada. So this is getting more insane by the minute, Congresswoman. What are you expecting the president to talk about tomorrow night at the State of the Union, and will it include this wide-open border and its impact on New York and other cities?
Well, I hope he does include it, but as you know, last week he came to New York City. He didn't even go visit the Watson Hotel where many of these migrants are housed. The mayor continues to use New York City's right of shelter law, which is intended for U.S. citizens, homeless New Yorkers, and applying it to those who are coming into our country illegally. Well over 70% of individuals that are crossing into our country and claim asylum do not have legitimate asylum claims. They are coming in illegally, and that has to be differentiated by this president. I don't know that he will address this issue, quite frankly, because he brought it up last year, said he wanted to work in a bipartisan manner to resolve it, and then he just ignored every proposal that we put forward to secure our border. We are concerned, and rightfully so. We had just the other day an Iranian who was on the terror watch list caught in Texas. He actually was able successfully to enter our country. Thankfully, the Texas DPS were able to find him. And look at the record amount of fentanyl, which, by the way, the migrants are citing as wanting to leave New York City. They said there's too much drug use, there's too much crime. They want to leave New York City. So think about that, right? Here are refugees from Venezuela and other countries who are claiming now that New York City is not where they want to raise their children. So it should be a wake-up call to both the mayor and the president. We need to get this crisis under control, and we can do it. All he needs to do, again, just like the energy policies, reverse his executive orders. Let's put back the policies of President Trump that were working. Let's stem the flow, and let's make sure that we differentiate between legitimate asylum seekers and those who are in the country illegally.
Well, I'm sorry, Congressman, he's not going to do any of that.
Well, he's not going to do any of it, but that's why we were so upset when the Senate took away our leverage when they passed that bill in December, because we were going to use our leverage, power of the purse, to put pressure on the president to do that. Remember, House is only 1/3 of the pie. We need the other 2/3 to come along if we're going to do anything. And I think the real way we can do anything is by making sure we use that budget process that reflects our priorities and not give in until the president does something to secure this border.
Well, there sure are a lot of crises for him to discuss tomorrow night. Cheryl, these are just one of several crises that we're talking about. You want to raise another one?
Well, obviously what's happening here in New York City, Congresswoman, at Cheryl Casoni, to the point about what Mayor Adams is doing here, these migrants saying that they're going to leave because of, yes, the crime in New York City. But remember that Governor Kathy Hochul has already heard from reportedly Nancy Pelosi herself saying, I lost my gavel because of New York State. Because New York State, the Democrats in this state did not take crime seriously, and that's why the House ended up flipping and going to the GOP. Is Governor Hochul, New York Democrats, going to finally get serious about crime in this city and in this state?
Well, look, we've been putting a lot of pressure on them to fix the bail law. They will never do what I want, which is for them to repeal this bail law altogether. But if they give back judges' discretion, which I think is on the table right now, that would be a huge thing. But they got to give judges complete discretion. And then the American people, the New Yorkers, they need to elect better judges to the bench, right? They can't elect these left-wing radical prosecutors and judges, or else we're going to continue to see this problem. I don't think the Democrats in New York will ever really truly take on public safety the way they should, the way a Mayor Giuliani would have or a Governor Pataki would have, and that's unfortunate. And unfortunately, the New Yorkers gave them a pass because they had an opportunity to eliminate Governor Kathy Hochul and replace her with Lee Zeldin, and they chose not to do that. So it's unfortunate for those that I represent who did not vote for this mayor, did not vote for this governor, and quite frankly have to go along for the ride. But I'll continue to fight for their interests in public safety. And look, we have a police officer's murderer up for parole next month. Gerard Carter, killed on Staten Island by a thug, and if we allow this police officer to be released, it once again sends the wrong message that we are putting criminals before public safety, before our law enforcement, and so that's right now the fight that we're facing on Staten Island.
All right, Congresswoman, thanks very much for being here, walking us through it. We so appreciate it. Nicole Maliotakis is in D.C.